Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts Alex and Sean. On this episode, we will be making up for not having a show last week and talking about the big Cubs trade and talking a little bit about the Bears. And as always, before we start, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. The season is starting back up in October, but it shouldn't stop you from heading on over to icehogs.com, getting a shirt, hat, season tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Oh, Alex, what a week for me to go on vacation, huh?
I know, and as soon as a lot of the news broke that I'm sure we're going to get to momentarily, the first thing I thought of was, we're not doing a show this week, so we can't have an immediate reaction to it.
Yeah, I was like, man, I got to figure out how to set this up on my phone so I can do it from California. But oh well. I mean, unless you live under a rock or you've been on vacation as well, you're probably quite familiar that the Cubs made a trade with the White Sox to acquire Jose Quintana, and I don't know about you, but I'm really shocked, A, that this happened, and B, that it happened well before the trade deadline.
Yeah, well, one of the things with me was that how it happened so quietly, because usually when you hear of a big blockbuster like this, you hear the murmurs and the rumors, where this was kept quiet very, very well, and then all of a sudden, there it was. Like, I was just scrolling through Twitter that morning. I had a job interview at 2 o'clock that day, so I'm up, I'm thinking about my interview, I'm just kind of scrolling. Then all of a sudden, I see Chicago Cubs, the official account, tweet, Cubs acquire pitcher Jose Quintana from White Sox. And my eyes bugged out of my skull. I'm like, what? Is this what? And sure enough, Twitter's suddenly blowing up. The official White Sox tweeted it, and a bunch of other writers. And I was just mouth agape for 5 minutes. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I was pretty much the same way. Is my friend, the one that's a White Sox season ticket holder, texted me, and I was like, he's just messing with me right now. So I go on ESPN.com, and boom, there it is. And I was like, what? And then I was like, I'm going to double check this. And I checked on like MLB.com and Twitter, and there it is. It's official.
And you have to check those blue check marks. You always got to look for those.
Oh, yeah. You got to check the blue check marks and make sure they're a legit account and not some random yo-yo.
Because you see so much of that this time of year.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? And sometimes some of those yo-yos are correct, but I think more often than not, if they are, it's coincidental.
Right, exactly, where they kind of take a murmur or a rumor and they try to make it official, so they make it look pretty real, and sometimes they're right in the end, even if it isn't. And then there's the times where they're just like, oh, ridiculous trade, Cubs trade Anthony Rizzo for, like, where you know it's obviously fake. But this was a trade where you scratch your head when you first see it, you check for the blue check mark, and then when you see it verified by all these accounts, you don't know what to say because you know it's true, but this is reality, something that has been talked about, but we all thought, okay, yeah, it's an ideal scenario to have Q on the north side, but it's not going to happen, and then it does.
Yeah, and I don't know if I was hearing reports. I didn't actually hear the interview, but I heard on a sports radio show in California while I was out there. I don't know if it was a local one or if it was a national one that we just don't hear in Chicago, but they were saying that in an interview with Rick Hahn, he was talking about how that they were at All-Star Game festivities and he had to hide behind something to take a phone call about the trade, so nobody heard him or anything. So he, it was some subterfuge in there and some spy stuff going on. But it's interesting, what they had to go through to kind of keep that secret.
Yeah, I heard that story too, and it makes it kind of interesting to be like, wow, so GMs actually have to do these certain things, and some of them even hide from the media to make these deals on the phone. That's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you hear reports and they come out because they're leaked by agents or they're leaked by GMs. I've heard stories how a lot of GMs have fake Twitter accounts so they can go and write things or see things or read things without, being official, their names. So there's a lot of game that goes on with this. It's not all, straightforward.
And then you have the Jed Hoyer account that just says spank in it.
Is that what it says?
I think that's what it says. It's it has 2 tweets.
How did anybody figure that one out?
Well, it's not an official account. It just says Jed Hoyer, and people are speculating over the years who runs it, and people think Theo is as a joke. I don't know if you know this, but I'm gonna look it up on Twitter right now. It's there's no picture, and it has 2 tweets, and one of them is just spanking it, and yeah. So I'm gonna look for this now, but I think that's pretty funny. But yeah, to your point. It really is interesting how there's different ways and protocol of making these kind of deals, and it's really kind of a big story in Chicago sports history because A, they kept it so quiet until the deal was made, and B, this is a blockbuster trade between the Cubs and the White Sox after so many years of having this narrative that they refused to make deals with each other.
Yeah, and I think part of it is you'll never convince me that there was no mandate from the White Sox ownership that they should not trade with the Cubs. I fully believe that because they didn't want to see the Cubs win a World Series and kind of overshadow the White Sox even more so. But I think now that they've officially decided, hey, we're doing this rebuild, we're going to do it right, and the Cubs have won a World Series, it just made it silly to keep that up, especially when the Cubs far and away had the best deal offer for Quintana.
Right, and this is something I keep preaching. This is a move that gave both sides what they wanted. The Cubs wanted a talented young starting pitcher with control. They got that. Not only did they get that, but they got it with a ridiculously friendly deal. And then the White Sox got a couple of talented top prospects in Cease and Jimenez. That's what they wanted. That's what they got. Right now, I see no winner or loser here because both accomplished what they wanted to get. Obviously, we haven't seen Eloy or Cease in the majors. That remains to be seen. But, the White Sox can't say they didn't get what they initially wanted when they made this trade.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the players involved in the trade. The other 2 players involved. So it was Cubs got Jose Quintana, and the White Sox got Eloy Jimenez, Dylan Cease, Matt Rose, and Bryant Fleet. I don't know anything about the last 2 because they're fairly far down in the farm system.
Yeah, I mean, from what I heard, they're just throw-ins.
Yeah, then. Dylan Cease is arguably the the top pitcher in the Cubs minor league organization. But I was okay with them throwing him in the deal, because from rumors I've heard is that the Cubs organization kind of favor some of the other pitchers that they're going to leapfrog him. So he was not a rising star. He was a settling star. And so really this comes down to Jose Quintana for Eloy Jimenez, who we have a lot of high hopes for, but as we've all saw with Felix PA, is you can have all the hopes in the world for somebody, and if they don't manifest, you held on to them and hurt yourself.
Right, and that's what people on the Cubs side, Cubs fans, really have to understand. And I think now for the most part they do, but there was a lot of knee-jerk reaction kind of when this deal was made, and people were talking about how they were going to miss Jimenez, yada, yada, yada. He's hitting, light towers. But look, we're built to win right now. We're trying to get players to help us right now and in the near future. We're not a rebuilding team like we were 3-4 years ago. We're not trying to wait for that big, huge prospect to come up. Our big, huge prospects are up, and they've won us a World Series. So right now's the time to use what you have left and get more major league talent.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you can have all these top talent prospects in your farm system, but two things to remember. One is right now they're just prospects. They could be tearing the cover off the ball in the minors, but until they do it in the majors, they're not helping anybody. And two, they're so young on the major league roster that where's there room for these guys to come play?
Right.
Is Eloy Jimenez they've got basically a lot of outfielders, and he can't play center, and that's the position that they would need him to play. And you already have your infield of the future. I mean, who's old? Javi Baez is young. Chris Bryant's young. Addison Russell is young. Rizzo is still pretty young. So where do you play these guys? You have to. They need pitching. Pitching is what they need.
Right, and people saying, "Oh, what about Dylan Cease for the future?" That's not going to help you now. He was an A-ball. He's not going to help you this year. And like I said, you're trying to win now, and Jose Quintana will not only help you now, but for the next 3 years.
Yeah, and I mean and who's to say that you can't sign him to an extension?
Exactly. Not like we're strapped for cash.
Yes, I mean, you could sign him to an extension where it gives him a raise now, and then you still have a favorable contract going forward. Nobody's to stop you from that. Especially since we had injuries. We had Lester, who imploded right before the All-Star game. Arrieta hadn't looked like himself in a while. Hendricks on the disabled list. You're just really struggling, and you need starting pitching.
Right, exactly. And I can't express this enough how much I love the deal. I mean, in terms of contract, this is a guy who's been as consistent as you could be the past 3-4 years, and you're paying him, what, $9-10 million a year for the next 3 years? I mean, it should be a crime how underpaid he is right now, but what a steal you could get with that freaking contract. You have mediocre pitchers with more owed money than Jose Quintana.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, the amount of money you added it's less than it's going to be more than offset by when Arrieta walks at the end of the season, because what's he making, 16 this year?
Yeah, something like that.
You're adding another pitcher and you still will financially have more money to play with next year to add even another pitcher if you need to.
Exactly. And also, if you want to go into this, I don't know, since it's just rumors and speculations, but if for some reason there is a deal that does involve Justin Verlander, and Justin Verlander comes here saying, okay, we won't give you a lot of talent, but we will eat a lot of that money because he is making a lot of money, and this deal is made as a salary dump. Well, there's another thing right there. You're even better in a financial position than you were if you took on a big contract or you really went out and for some reason paid someone right now. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and from what I hear is that the Mike Ilitch's son that now is after the old man passed away, his son is now the owner of the Tigers, and he's got, from what I'm hearing, a mandate to cut salary.
Right.
His dad was big on, I have a lot of money, I'm old, I just want to win, I'm going to pump money into this. And the son is not in that same frame of mind, so I think the Tigers have sort of lost some leverage as far as their getting talent back. And, I mean, because ideally they would like to make somebody pay the majority of his salary and get talent back. And I just don't think that they are in a position to do so. And come trade deadline, this is one of those things they're going to have to trade him or dump him. And once you get closer to that trade deadline, I think that you lose a lot of leverage. And if you're the Cubs and you offer to just take on a salary without him giving just a low level prospect, I think you could just get it done.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are suggesting, and I think that's a fair thing to say because, you remember when the Cubs first started shedding their big guys, their contracts. We didn't get crap in return. I mean, Soriano, we didn't care what we got in return. That was just a salary dump. When we traded Derek Lee in 2010, kind of the same thing. We didn't get anything in return, but, his contract was off the board. So I think that's going to be something that the Tigers are going to be doing, especially with a guy like Verlander, who is in his mid-30s and isn't doing what he once did in his prime. So, yeah, I definitely agree. I think there could be a deal done where talent isn't given up, but you do eat money, and I'm okay with the Cubs eating money. I do not worry at all about a Cubs financial situation because, let's face it, the Cubs are loaded, so that doesn't worry me. What I wouldn't want is giving up Major League or any talent we have left in the farm for Justin Verlander, but if you could get it done without giving up that and just eating salary, I'd do it.
Oh, absolutely. And I 1,000,000% agree with you. This is a sport without a like a true salary cap. So spend all the money you want. I don't care. It's not coming out of my pocket. And I worry about giving up prospects because that's the future, and I want this team to be good for as long as possible. But adding of Justin Verlander for just straight cash, I don't see a problem with that. Because
yeah, I don't either.
If you get an Arrieta who's pitched like he has in the second half so far, which has been, we'll talk a little more about that in a bit, but it's been pretty darn good. And you have Quintana pitching well. If Lester pitches well, then if you add Verlander as your fourth, and then or fifth because of Hendricks, I think I can't see a problem with that. I mean, he may be overpaid for a fourth or a fifth, but you know what?
Screw it.
You're not going to find many fourth or fifths starting pitchers in baseball that are as good as Justin Verlander.
Yeah, so Justin Verlander, like you said, I'd be fine with eating the money. And you said you would take that as a 4 or 5 starter even with the money, and I definitely agree because he's a veteran with experience. He may not be great this year, but he was really good last year. I know that was last year, and that shouldn't always weigh on this year, but with a guy with that track record, if you're not paying much in talent, think about it. The Cubs are probably going to get a TV deal. Imagine how much more money they're going to have with that. And we all know with the speculation, what they're going to do with a lot of that money is they're going to sign Bryce Harper when the time comes. So all in all, one of the last things that worries me about this franchise is money.
Yeah, I don't worry about that money at all. I'm just looking at the scores. Did Milwaukee already play today, or are they still playing?
They are off today.
Okay, so That means the Cubs fell out of first place today.
Right,
Their
they're
loss. But
half a game back.
yeah, but basically, think about this: is if you have Lester, Quintana, Arrieta, Hendricks, Verlander, is you take on that salary with those 5 starting pitchers. All you need to do is win one more game than the Brewers from now till the season is over, and you make it to the playoffs. If Verlander doesn't pitch well, you just go with the other 4, because you're only going to go on a 4-man rotation anyway in the playoffs. Is you leave him or you move him to the bullpen, or you leave him off the roster.
Right, exactly. And that was something I was going to ask you. If you got Verlander, let's say he came right now, and you were looking ahead to a potential postseason rotation, if you were to look right now, who would you think would be the odd man out?
If it was starting today,
Yeah.
that's a tough one.
Because, look, I know last year we signed Lackey for the postseason, but I think it's fair to say this year he would be an odd man out, considering his age and his decline.
Oh, absolutely. He if we're talking him, but if we're talking between, are you talking if they added Verlander or without Verlander?
With Verlander, but I just wanted to make it clear that we're already ruling out John Lackey.
Oh yeah, John Lackey's gone. Eddie Butler, well, he's already gone, but he would be out. Montgomery, no, he would be in the bullpen. Man, if I had to go right now, is you have to go Quintana, you have to go Lester.
Lester's your number one. There's no doubt.
Even though he's probably pitching the worst right now. I honestly, I would probably say I would leave today, July 24th. I would leave off Hendricks, just because he's just coming back from an injury. We don't know what he's going to be.
Right, yeah, I get that. And watching him today against the White Sox, his velocity wasn't great. He had a lot of good movement and location, but you could definitely tell he wasn't 100% there. So, you keep that in mind. I mean, okay, so you have your top absolute 2 no doubts. Lester, Quintana. There's no question, no debate. They would probably be maybe 1-2 or maybe 1-3, but those are no doubts. One that's interesting to think about is Arrieta. With his inconsistency and his walk problems, maybe you scratch your head at Arrieta right now.
I thought about that, but I mean, if I'm sole in charge, maybe I do it knowing that he's leaving anyway. But if I think there's no way that Joe Madden would ever do that, especially since he did well in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, he did.
So I think he would go with that track record. It's hard because the only guy without a track record in the playoffs out of that group is Quintana. You're 100% going with him because he's
absolutely.
He's a lefty, and he's solid.
Right. Now, here's another thought I kind of had. If Kyle Hendricks is doing Kyle Hendricks things, and we saw him in the postseason last year, he was phenomenal. Maybe you almost say Justin Verlander is your odd man out, and you just kind of bring him in this year to fill starts and eat some innings at this point. I mean, it's something you wouldn't have done a few years ago, obviously, but at this point of his career, maybe he does come as just kind of an inning eater or just as a guy in the back as support and something like that. I think you'd have to consider that as well.
Yeah, I would definitely consider that, and that was my toss up. I just kind of looked at where they're at right at this moment. I wouldn't hesitate for a second to put any of those guys. If the season was ending right now and any of them were just playing or pitching bad, I wouldn't have qualms. But I think Verlander is the guy, though, that if you are going into the postseason, you're going with your 4-man rotation, I don't think they leave him off the roster. I think they just move him to a bullpen guy, because if somebody gets hurt, God forbid, or if somebody just has a bad inning and you need somebody to come in and pitch 4 innings, clearly he's going to be your best option.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas last year, the 5th starter just got left off because he wasn't pitching well and there was no need to have him on.
Yeah, Jason Hamill, he didn't do anything at all last postseason. He wasn't even on the roster. That's right.
No, not even for any of, because you can reset your roster after each series, and he never got any of those. But he had a really terrible second half. I mean, all his great stats last year were all his best starts were in the first half.
Oh, that was pretty typical of him. And I know he pitched in the postseason the year before and was meh. But yeah, so that is an interesting thing to think about. And of course, that has to actually happen to talk about that if you get Justin Verlander. Because here's the thing, there's so much talks about it, and it part of me feels like it's going to happen, but part of me thinks it's not. Because there's a lot of talks between the Cubs and the Tigers, and it seems like, according to sources that I've heard on Twitter, like Morrissey or other of those writers, is that the Tigers and the Cubs have been most active together more than like any other team with the Tigers right now. So, take that with a grain of salt, but something to think about.
Yeah, and I know that the Cubs inquired about some other pitchers first, and they were told no, that's not happening. But I just feel like there's too many fires for it to be, or too much smoke for there not to be a fire of some sort. And I have a feeling that in the Cubs' mind, they know that Verlander deal is there. It's whether or not they can find something better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think personally that a more realistic scenario, okay, maybe not realistic, but I have a better feeling that this is going to happen than Verlander. I can really see the deal for Alex Avila being made for a backup veteran catcher. That I really I could really see that happening. It would be a perfect fit, I think, just a matter of what kind of deal it is. So, that's just kind of my opinion.
I've also heard that they are interested in Jonathan Lucroy.
I heard that too. I don't know. I think that's him and Yu Darvish. I think that's just blabber. I don't actually see that happening. But then again, I didn't see Quintana happening, so
That's
sure
true.
knows what I know.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have a Yu Darvish, but I think he's a rental, and you're gonna have to give up way too much for him. There's too many people that are willing to give up for him, and I think you just give up too much for a rental player. Although Yu Darvish does have a no-trade clause, and the Cubs are one of the few teams that are on that no-trade clause that he'll accept a trade to. So that's a little bit of leverage in the Cubs' favor, but there's still not much leverage in their pocket.
Well, and the whole thing with Darvish is I don't want a rental who's injury prone. I mean, I know he's a good talent, and if he was less injury prone and under control for a few years, then yeah, but for a rental, I don't know.
Yeah, I would probably stay away. I mean, he is a very good pitcher, but he's about to turn 31, and he has a lot of miles, and he's just he's injury prone, and he's a rental.
Right. So it doesn't fit really the mold of what Theo wants this year and the controllable young kind of deal. That's not what you'd get in Yu Darvish. Obviously, there are some other guys out there that have been talked about a lot, like Sonny Gray and Chris Archer, but right now it looks like the Rays might actually be buyers, and Sonny Gray is being spotted by a lot of teams right now, including the Brewers, including the Yankees. probably a few other teams too. But those two teams that I just listed, the Brewers and the Yankees, are going to have more assets now in the farm system to make a trade with Sonny Gray and the A's than the Cubs right now.
Is it weird that I sort of hope that the Brewers make a giant splash and trade a ton to get Sonny Gray? Because here's my thinking is I don't think Sonny Gray helps them enough to win the division. And then they give up future talent from their farm system for Sonny Gray. That's my thinking.
I kind of had a very similar, if not exact thought. I'm like, man, what if they mortgage their future away to try to salvage this season? And I'm really trying to go back and forth in my mind as to what they're going to do because, I mean, they're still technically in first place right now. Most, if not all, people are saying that they're not going to stay there. But the Brewers, they don't have winning seasons as often as many other teams. So what if they just say, screw it, we're desperate, we want some winning baseball, let's just go for it now? I'm juggling back and forth of what they're going to do. One thing I could also see them doing is just like nothing, just kind of stand pat and say, well, we still have a future if we don't trade, and maybe we'll contend, but if not, we'll still have that future. So yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking at Yu Darvish's stats for this year, and his FIP is the highest it's ever been in his entire career by a decent amount, by more than a half run. His ERA plus is higher than it's been. His home runs per 9 is the highest it's ever been. His strikeouts are significantly down from anywhere they've ever been. Those aren't bad signs.
Yeah, not a good fit. Don't think it's going to happen. The Cubs right now are in a position where anyone who's on the trade market, they're pretty much going to be linked to, because Theo is going to shop around, and shopping around doesn't necessarily mean making a serious offer. It's shopping around. It's seeing what they want and what they could possibly get. That's part of shopping around, and when you do that, you're going to be, quote, linked to a team about a player. So what could very well happen is they say, oh, Yu Darvish, so what's your deal with him? What would you kind of want? And then they say something, and it's like, all right, well, have a nice day. Where that's just kind of, you're shopping, you're seeing what's up with him, and that's the end of it. But yet they're, quote, linked to him, if that makes sense, if you see what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just reading now. The Cubs are apparently, their scouts are watching Pat Neshek from the Phillies.
I want Pat Neshek. I would love to have him in the bullpen.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, he's having a career type year, but still, like, that'd be worth a chip worth having. I'm trying to see what other rumors are out there.
Well, okay, there were the talks about Zach Britton in the Cubs, and as much of a dream as that would be to have your last two guys in your bullpen being Zach Britton and Wade Davis, I don't really see that happening, especially if you have other teams out there like the Nationals who really need a closer and they have some assets to get him. But that is another name that they were linked to at one point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I can't see that happening but if they somehow pried him away at a decent trade, I mean, that just shortens that game to 7 innings.
Right.
Because you have to. I mean, here's my thing about closers is if you got somebody that's a lockdown 8 and 9, kind of like what the Yankees had when they were winning World Series, is think about the psychological stress that it puts on the other team. Is they know that they have to score all of their runs in the first 7 innings because they're not getting to you in the 8th and the 9th. Then they start pressing. And if you look at the Cubs, this is a team that's pressing. And pressing teams don't score a lot of runs. And it's sort of like it's a psychological factor in your favor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at last year when the Indians and Cubs had their respective bullpens with their closers. People were saying you got to get to these guys because you're going to have to face Chapman or Miller or Allen, and that goes a long way, especially in this day and age with the way the pens are used. And you look at the Nationals, you say the opposite, where you're like, okay, let's just kind of survive the first 6 innings, run up the starter's pitch count, and get to the Nationals bullpen. So that makes a huge difference right there.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Did you see the Royals just acquired Cahill?
I did see that, and Travis Wood is going to San Diego.
Crazy.
Yeah, I know. You know, here's something interesting I wanted to mention with you in this whole Cubs rumor mill and whatnot. Think about this year compared to last year. Last year, the whole idea was, all right, we need a closer. Let's rent a closer. We've got to get this World Series now. Where now the last thing we want is a rental player. Of course, we had a lot more assets back then, but it's interesting to think about because if I remember around this time last year, it was like, all right, we getting Davis are we getting Chapman or are we getting Miller? Like those were the 2 guys they kept being linked to. Now it's like they're linked to everybody and anybody.
I think that part of that is they're the reigning champions and they've struggled in the first half. And I'm sure that there's some truth in it. I'm sure that, last year it was you knew what they were doing. They were going for a closer. They wanted a closer. This year, they could be linked to backup catcher. They can be linked to any bullpen position, a starter, both back end and front end. So there's a lot more they could be linked to, and you know that Jed and Theo, they're not resting on their laurels, as they're out there actively on the phones talking to everybody. So I think there's some of it is overzealous writers exaggerating things into something that they aren't quite yet, and another part of it is that where there's smoke there's fire. Is they probably are calling about everybody just to see, because if you can acquire a Britain from the Orioles for your 5th prospect or 6th prospect, is you go, oh, you know what, maybe we do that. But if they're like, well, we want Addison Russell, then you're like, all right, they're not worth it.
Right, exactly. And that's what I said earlier, the whole idea about shopping around. You won't know exactly what they want until they actually tell you. Because sometimes you could be surprised of what little they want or what their ultimate goal is. I mean, like, for example, I don't know if this is the greatest example, but we talked about Justin Verlander, and you could call up saying, all right, what do you want for him? And they're saying, well, our goal is really to eat salary, so if you just take this and you give us something small like this, then okay. Or, they may surprise you and say, well, we want some of your top guys. And you're like, yeah, no. And then it may come to the fact where they keep asking for top guys in other organizations, and they keep saying, yeah, no. But eventually you'll come around and like, well, we need to do something, so you offered us this, we'll give it to you. And in the end, you won't know until you actually phone and see. So that's why you got all these people being linked to the Cubs, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a different sport, but in the NBA, I mean, you never know when you can get a top 15 player for a bust, an injured player, and moving down a couple spots in the first round.
Right. And of course, there's also the idea of you and your coaching staff, or you and your, trainers, whatever, in your organization, they see something in a player on another organization that they don't value much, but you value a lot, and you feel like you can work out several things with your guys, so you get him cheap and you don't give him much, and then you work with him, and boom, there it is. I mean, you could almost say that was the case with Arrieta for a bit. I mean, when that trade was made, what they made it sound like is that it was priority for like international bonus signing, like priorities. That's really what it was made, but it turned out to be, wow, we got Arrieta and Strop, and look what they've turned into. So that also happens too. Some people just value other kinds of players and think they could work with them better than others.
I fully agree on that.
Quickly, I found the Jed Hoyer account. It's got 2 tweets. It's got over 2,000 followers, following 20, only 2 tweets. April 14th, 2009, just says spanking it. And then on November 3rd, 2016, you remember that date. Exclamation point, anyone have a hand towel?
That's
that
awesome.
account that's the only 2 tweets that account has.
Who are the 20 that it follows?
I'm gonna look at that now. Let's see. And there's a lot of speculation that it's Theo just being goofy. Okay. John Henry, the Red Sox owner, Terry Moran, chief correspondent, ABC News, Rachel Maddow, Kevin Pellick, the NBA, Sean Diddy Combs, JetBlue Airways, Threadless, Tony Robbins, Kevin Rose, Scott Simon, Martha Stewart, Good Morning America, Babo Baka Chain, I don't know what that is, Bizzone, Gavin Newsom, Trent Reznor, BJ Mendelson, and Brooke Curve Charvet.
That's so weird.
I know. And like I said, it's got over 2,000 followers. So,
I'm just catching up on some baseball news because I was out of pocket for most of the time. Is Pablo Sandoval re-signed with the Giants?
Yeah, he did. He was not working at all in Boston, injuries, out of shape, playing badly, kind of left on rough terms after winning 3 World Series with the Giants, and he's back there.
Wow. And it's definitely two rough injuries in baseball with Carlos Correa and what's his face from the Dodgers,
Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah, both of those are rough injuries.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for the Dodgers, they're so far ahead, and they have, like, by far the best record of the NL right now, where they miss him for 4 to 6 weeks and get him back before the postseason. So, you know, it does suck for them, no doubt, but it probably isn't going to make or break their season.
No, it's just going to be, because it's a back injury, those linger. And
right, that is a concern, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so that's, you never want to, you don't like to win because of injuries, but that does help the Cubs.
Yeah, exactly. So, you see, we had the scare with Bryant. Luckily, that wasn't anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So since we had a last show, is the Cubs have come out of the gates playing pretty darn well. Swept the Orioles, swept the Braves, took 2 or 3 from the Cardinals, and the one loss that they had against the Cardinals was a friend of mine at work. She was at that game, and she was also at the John Lester game at the before the All-Star game.
Ooh.
And I was like, you got to stop. You can't go to any more games this season.
That's worse than me. Wow.
Oh, yeah, that's way worse than you. In that game, Arrieta actually had a fairly nice start, but Edwards, Grimm, and Rondon came in and just pooped the bed.
Was it 6 walks, 6 hits in 1 inning without recording an out?
Yeah, nine runs in the 8th inning.
Oof. That was a nightmare.
Yeah. So, I mean, this team does have life in it. There's still room to go. But I read an interesting thing, and I don't know if I fully agree, but it's an interesting point. This article basically said Wilson Contreras is making a case for being the most important Cub.
Well, I mean, he's certainly been one of the more productive ones as of recent, and he's emerging as kind of a force on that team in a positive way, and he's working with a lot of their pitchers, and it's an interesting point to make. I mean, obviously the face of your franchise is still probably Anthony Rizzo, but he's definitely very important.
Yeah, I mean, there's no planet where I could say that Wilson Contreras is not important. And since the All-Star game, he's offensively kind of been carrying the team. But you can't ever make me think that Chris Bryant isn't the most important player on the team. Played 2 seasons in baseball. This is his 3rd, and he's already been Rookie of the Year, an MVP, World Series champion. I think as Chris Bryant goes, this team goes.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that as well. I'd say Wilson Contreras on the field is top 5 in importance, but the most important, I think you got to put your 2 cornerstones at right there. But yeah, you got to give credit where credit's due, where Contreras has really helped carry this team throughout this half, and he struggled today. It was pretty evident. Very frustrating game today. I'm just going to throw that out there. Really bad at bat to end the game. But yeah, I mean, overall, he is very important, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you had to ask me his level of importance on this team as far as the players go, I'd go Chris Bryant number 1, John Lester number 2, and going into the season, I would say Rizzo was easily number 3, but I think that gap is really closed. I'm still going to say Rizzo 3, Contreras 4. I think he's more important than any of the rest of your infield or anybody in your outfield.
Yeah, I mean, Contreras, he's definitely important lately with how he's been contributing behind the plate, with the pitchers, with the bat. So really an overall great performance on all ends. But, you know, I'd still, like you said, put Rizzo and Bryant over that. But you really got to give him credit, and I hope he keeps this up because he's a really fun player to watch.
Absolutely. I like him. And that last at-bat today, it wasn't a good at-bat on his part. I didn't necessarily agree with some of the calls of the umpire, but
the strike 2 was kind of rough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was so bad that he should have lost his composure like he did. And because after that strike and he lost his composure, I was like, this is done. He's not in the headspace to do this.
Right.
And then he breaks his bat afterwards. I know he's a young player and he's a fiery player, but he's got to be a little more controlled than that.
Right. Yeah, maybe this is a lesson for him because I'm like, wow, he really lost it after that at-bat. Like, he slammed his bat and broke it, and, you know, I got to tell you, that was a frustrating one today overall as a Cub fan.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if this is a moment that you wish you had a veteran catcher, if this was last year, I would imagine you'd see David Ross getting the start tomorrow, just to give Contreras a day to cool off and get his head back on straight and watch a veteran catcher, learn the ropes a little more. But with having no veteran presence in the backup catcher spot, I think, and the hotness of his bat for the last week, I would imagine he's starting tomorrow.
Yeah, and especially with John Lackey on the mound, it'd be hard to imagine wanting to throw a young kid in Victor Caratini with John Lackey. So, yeah. But in this game, obviously we had the wind killing a grand slam from Rizzo. We couldn't really square up Miguel Gonzalez. The Sox were losers of 9 straight, worst team in the American League, trading everything in full tank mode, and we lost to them.
Yeah, and I mean, part of me is just like, you know what? It's baseball. There's 162 games. You're gonna lose to a bad team. It's a fact. You can't. Even the 27 Yankees lost to a bad team at some point. But the other part of me is like, this is just kind of indicative of who the Cubs are. Is they live and die by the home run, and they don't have enough hot batters to carry them. I mean,
Yeah,
you look at the Nats, and they've got like a murderer's row right now, and the Cubs just, they have the potential to be that. They just don't. They're not performing.
Yeah, and I mean, I was saying this earlier, and I say it a lot. I feel like every crosstown series, the White Sox, no matter how good or bad they are, they always bring out their absolute best in that series. And, you know, oh well, there's 3 more games of this godforsaken series. If you don't mind me going on a mini rant for a few seconds, all in all, I hate this series. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I dread it every year. And the only thing I like about this series is when it's over. So, long story short, I hate this series.
Oh, I agree. I used to like it, but at some point it's like, what do we gain by this? It just kind of divides the fans even more, and it just, the Cubs at this point aren't looking at this as a rivalry like the White Sox do, and especially when they sandwich it between a series against the Cardinals and a series against the team that's been in, is in first place in your division, that you're only half game behind. Like, of course you're not going to take it as seriously. You just get out of a good series win, and you're looking forward to winning a series to get back into first place. It's easy to overlook.
Yeah, and it's just kind of brutal that you have to play these games in the middle of the week. It's like, really? Remember when they used to be on the weekends earlier in the year and you kind of just got it over with? Now it's like, wow, you're playing these games right before the trade deadline, sandwiched in between 2 really big series like you mentioned. Just, blah. 1 down, 3 to go, and I hope the Cubs could at least split this. I mean, on paper, the Cubs should dominate this series, but like I said, the White Sox always bring out their best in the crosstown games. Tomorrow is a matchup that I could also see not going well for the Cubs with Lackey and Carlos Rodon, because if he's got his slider on tomorrow, that's going to be hell for our hitters. John Lackey's John Lackey. You never know what you're going to get. And then the next 2 games are at Guaranteed Rate Field, and you never know what's going to happen there. So, I don't know. I went into the series more worried about it than I should have, and they've already lost the game. And, I was dreading this series more than I was. Okay, maybe not more, but, I was pretty nervous about that Cardinals series. But it's like, we have these Brewers and Cardinals series. Can we not do this crosstown stuff? Like, just ugh.
Yeah, I don't like the having to see Carlos Rodon tomorrow. I fully agree with you, because if that guy is on, it could be just nasty. But if that guy is off, you could see the Cubs racking up like 10 runs.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be either or. And today, Miguel Gonzalez went 8 innings, so they didn't really have a chance to go against that bullpen. And the one guy they did bring in from the bullpen was the last good guy they have left in Swerski.
Yeah, so I feel like no matter what, the White Sox always win that first game of the series.
I can't remember the last time they didn't. Going back the past 2 years, they've won the first game. The only time they didn't win that first game, one time, and that was the year the Cubs swept them in 2013. That's it.
Yeah, I'm looking up the last 3 starts for Rodon. July 3rd, he went 6 1/3, gave up 2 runs, 10 strikeouts and 3 walks. But the 9th, he went against the Rockies, went 5 1/3, gave up 6 earned, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks. And then his last outing against the Dodgers, he went 3 2/3, 5 earned runs, 4 home runs, 3 walks and 4 strikeouts. That's the kind of performance we need him to do tomorrow.
Yeah, no kidding. And like I said, you had Kyle Hendricks do what he did first time back. It's like, okay, he gave it his all. He tried, and he did pretty okay. He was on a limit, whatnot. That wasn't really what was upsetting. What was upsetting is that we couldn't get anything done against Miguel Gonzalez. And I tweeted last night saying the White Sox are full of junkers, really, and junkers are what the Cubs struggle against. You see guys they dominate like Waka. Waka throws 95 plus, but he throws it straight, and Cubs feast on that hard thrown stuff. But the soft tossing junk stuff, it flusters them.
Yeah, Joe Boo can only hit a straight ball.
Cannot hit curve.
So, yeah, I mean that's where we're at with the Cubs. It's, they're right back into this. They've gained 5 games in the standings in like a week and a half, and you hope you can keep up the hot streak. You can't keep relying on the Brewers to lose 8 of 9 or 7 of 8 or whatever they did.
Yeah.
So I mean, you just need to start playing better baseball. I mean, they're playing better than they were, but it's not the level of baseball that they need to play to compete for a World Series.
We're seeing more close to what we want to see. We're seeing, I mean, the starting pitching has probably been the biggest improvement. That's been far and away better than the first half so far. The hitting has been a bit better as well. The defense has been a bit better. The thing that's kind of going down a little bit is the bullpen quality. It's giving up more walks and more runs, and part of me thinks the reason is they've had to work so hard in the first half, it's kind of catching up to them. It's the way the game of baseball works. Yeah, and look, you win a few, let's say over the next 8 games, they win 4 or 5. I think they're okay. I really do. What I don't want is a bad series against a terrible rebuilding White Sox team to suddenly kind of derail them again. That's my biggest fear. Because to do it against a team like that it'd be like getting swept by the Padres again. A team that you clearly have to beat at this point of the season. You don't want that. You don't know what these other teams in this division are doing. They look great one week, and the next week they look terrible, so you don't know about that. And number 3, let's face it, we would get a lot of crap from White Sox fans. Kind of just a little funny added joke in there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and the Cubs just can't afford to lose to bad teams. They're already struggling against winning teams. If you're struggling against winning teams, you need to dominate the lower teams, or you're not a playoff contending team.
Right, and I look at the Cubs play right now, and I look at the improved Cubs play, and I don't really gauge it yet against postseason, because at the end of the day, you get in the postseason, no matter what your record is, you have a chance. Everyone has a chance. So right now, the only thing to think about is getting to the postseason, because some people are like, well, what if they meet up against the Dodgers or the Nationals, yada, yada. And I just say, let's worry about that when we get there, if we get there. Until then, let's just worry about getting in the postseason.
Oh, that's so true. I mean, in other sports like hockey, NFL, like those are sports where the best teams tend to do the best in the playoffs. Where baseball, it's a weird one because the playoffs are basically a sprint and the season is a marathon. And you might be the best marathon runner, but you can't do a sprint to win a race. And let me look at the Cardinals a couple years ago when they barely made it into the playoffs, but then they caught fire and out-sprinted everyone to win the World Series. So it's a tough one to gauge because it's not always the best team to win.
Right, and I think if the Cubs do get in the postseason, do I think the odds are all in their favor with the way the Dodgers are playing this year? No, but I would think that now that this team has won a championship and made another deep run the year before that that people would say, hey, I could see them being a favorite, and maybe, they catch fire again, and it's a team that people don't want to see. If you're not the Cubs, you don't want to see the Cubs. So, like I said, I'm not really looking ahead at matchups right now. I want to get into the postseason, and I want a division title. I don't want to have to go through a coin flip wild card game. I mean, if I had a choice between no playoffs at all or the coin flip wild card game, I'd take the wild card game, but really, this team is going to be playing for the division, and they're going to want to win the division.
I'm looking at the playoff probabilities based on simulations of games, and right now it has the Cubs have a 89.3% chance of making the playoffs. You know who has the second highest percentage to make the playoffs for the Cubs division? Cardinals.
So over the Pirates.
Pirates. So right now the odds of making the playoffs in the Cubs division, Cubs 89.3%, Cardinals 17.6%, Pirates 13.1%, Brewers 9.7%.
What a drop. Wow.
And Reds 0.0.
Well, yeah, that goes without saying, but yeah, wow. I mean, that's interesting when you think about it. I thought the Pirates' chances would be a bit higher than that, because I'll be honest with you, I was a little worried about the Pirates when they started getting hot. Even when they were beating the Brewers, I'm like, okay, you guys are beating the Brewers, that's good, but, you're going to be kind of close to us. So, I don't know. I saw the Pirates being somewhat of a bigger threat than the Cardinals at the moment, but, you know what the Cardinals do. I mean, they don't look good this year, but you never know. Who do you think is the biggest threat in the division?
Cardinals. They just have this voodoo magic, and somehow, they'll be like, oh, we found this 48-year-old guy on the street, and he can, he'll have a 2.5 ERA for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy Pham, who I thought was like 24, 25, he's like 29. He's almost 30. I didn't know that. And look what the season he's having.
Yeah. Hate that guy.
Pham. The guy I get annoyed with is Randall Grichuk because he's trash against every team but the Cubs.
Oh, he's so trash. I can't stand that guy.
I'm like, if he turned out to be the prospect he was predicted to be and he was mashing everyone, it's like, yeah, okay, you're good. Albert Pujols killed us because he's one of the best hitters ever, and Joey Votto kills us because he's one of the best hitters of our generation, but this is a guy who only hits against the Cubs, and it's mind-boggling.
I'm just looking at the playoff odds for the Mets. They have them at 7.7%, which is shocking, because it's 2 years ago. Everybody was talking about them and the Cubs would be in the NFC, the National League Championship Series against each other every year, duking it out with the Cubs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were plenty of people in 2016. Like, a lot of people were high on the Cubs, but there were a lot of people picking the Mets to win the World Series.
Yeah, and you know what? That should just tell the Cubs and the Cubs fans that how easy it is to go from top of the, pretty close to the top of the world to mediocrity really quickly.
But what we have the luxury of having that the Mets don't is that we have a series under our belt with this scheme. They don't.
And they're still paying Bobby Bonilla.
And they're still paying Bobby Bonilla. When you think about it, that Mets team really is not run well. I mean, the whole situation with Noah Syndergaard and the arm problems, the way that was managed, you're seeing all these guys get hurt. It's just the Mets are just a very messy organization, and it's really is a surprise that they had that really good year in 2015 with it was a very talented team, no doubt. They had a lot of great pitching and everything clicked at the right time, but there are a lot of things about the franchise that are just kind of scattered around right now, and it's like, man, for a good year or so, they were predicted to be a World Series favorite.
Yeah. Well, I guess I don't really have much else to say about baseball. One last thing. Pretty much will be next time we record will be after the trade deadline or really, really close to it. Prediction time. Do the Cubs make another move? Is it gonna, if you think so, major or minor, and go out on a limb and try to predict a trade?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to say definitely yes, they are going to make a trade. As for what, I almost see maybe a mid-level Mike Montgomery type deal where you trade something for something. It's not a minor trade. It's not a blockbuster. It's kind of in the middle of the road. And like I said earlier, I could see a guy like Alex Avila coming in as the veteran backup. I could see that trade being made. I'm going to say right now, I don't see a Sonny Gray. I don't see a Yu Darvish. I don't see a Zach Britton. But I do also think they may make a move for another reliever as well. So I think, yes, they're going to make a move, and they're going to get Alex Avila as a veteran catcher and another bullpen guy. That's my prediction.
I think they will make another trade too, and I think they're going to bring in a bullpen arm. And I would not, and I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to throw a name out there that has not had a very good season, but was pretty darn important to the Cubs last year. Travis Wood comes back.
Oh.
I mean, the Royals are going to pay for his salary for the next 2 years. So if you get him, he doesn't cost anything. And based on what he's done this season, you probably don't have to give up very much for him. And,
Probably not.
so you could probably have him for nothing, and he doesn't cost anything. So that's my bold prediction: is they bring Travis Wood back, getting the band back together.
All right.
So we are on record. If anybody out there wants to throw out predictions, just get up with us. Let's see. I guess we don't really have too much to talk about. We talked about the White Sox big trade.
There's the other trade they made.
Oh yeah, I guess I forgot about that one. They were able to move Robertson and
Frazier.
And Todd Frazier.
And Canely.
Yeah. So let's talk about that one real quick.
My overall thoughts on it, if I'm just going to go ahead and give my overall thoughts, I think it fit what both teams needed. The Yankees got another pen guy that they're familiar with. They got a very underrated pen guy in Canely. Todd Frazier, I think Yankee Stadium will be a good place, a good fit for him. But in the long run, the Sox getting Rutherford, I think, was a very good move on their part. Some people think that the Sox didn't get enough, but I'm like, well, considering what that package was made out of, I think it was a fair deal. Todd Frazier he hits home runs, that's about it, and he's a pretty good glove. Canely's a good reliever. Robertson is a good closer, not the greatest, but a good one. So I think them getting another top prospect and a few other decent prospects in there, I thought that was a fair deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably could have gotten more if they just straight up traded David Robertson, possibly. But I think part of it was they took a little bit less in the prospects, but the other team had to take Todd Frazier, and
right,
eat that contract. So
and the Sox in their deal, they had to take Tyler Clippard.
Yeah, so it was an okay trade. I just don't know if the market for David Robertson was going to go up anymore. It was made clear that their best option is a trade partner, and the Nationals made it their ownership made it clear that they're not adding more payroll. So
Right.
I just don't know where else you were going to go with a closer that isn't a dominant closer. He's a fairly good one. He's not a dominant one.
He's not a Jansen. He's not a Davis. He's not a Britton.
Yeah, and you have a Britton on the market still. He's going to get a lot of interest, whereas David Robertson's going to be the afterthought.
Right, exactly. But I thought it was a fine trade overall, and it got a lot of attention because there were a lot of deals involved a lot of players involved in the trade. So, it was interesting to look at, but I don't think it had the blockbuster type value of the Quintana Jimenez trade.
Oh yeah, that was nowhere near that trade. That's a blockbuster deal. This one is just a nice one. So I'm just looking at the top 30 rankings of their farm system. So they got their number 3 player. I mean, Torres is their 1, Clint Frazier's 2, Blake Rutherford is their 3rd going into the season. So you got their 3rd best prospect.
And it's not like the Yankees are like, well, here's the farm for Frazier, Robertson, and Canely. They gave up Rutherford, but they still got a lot of other prospects.
Yeah, and I think we all know after the Arrieta trade that, you can sometimes those throw-ins can be a real a real winner.
Yeah.
Let's see where did Ian Clark and come on there? He's not a top 10. So they got their number 3 prospect and some other throw-ins. So I don't think it was a bad deal. I think a lot of White Sox fans probably felt that they could get a lot more just because they have gotten a lot more for other players. But in reality is, there's better options at closer, and there's only so many teams that are looking for a closer.
Right, and I think they should, and what a lot of White Sox fans have said is, we'll take it. We'll take Rutherford. That's fine. So, yeah, I think be happy with that.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you look at the White Sox farm system right now, it's really deep and really good.
Yeah, I mean, them and the Braves have 2 outstanding farm systems right now.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is the White Sox, they have somebody at most positions. I mean, they've got pitching, they've got hitting, they've got most positions covered. So it's, they're going to be able to roll waves of players in over the next couple of years.
Right, and you look at kind of the status of what they are right now. You look at how they're performing, and a good amount of them are performing well. Jimenez is doing well. Kopech's doing pretty well. I think Reynaldo Lopez is doing pretty well. Those are the ones I know off the top of my head. So, they got at least half their prospects doing pretty well right now in the minors, so that's a good sign as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I mean, you've got a 2nd/3rd base prospect in Yoan Moncada. You've got a right-handed pitcher in Lucas Giolito. You've got another right-handed pitcher in Michael Kopech, so you got 2 starters there. A 3rd one in Reynaldo Lopez and right-handed. Carson Fulmer. You got your catcher of the future, Zach Collins. Another right-handed pitcher, Zach Birdie. Dane Dunning, Alec Hansen. You've got Eloy Jimenez. You've got Rutherford. You've got infield. You've got outfield. You got pitchers. Like this is a pretty darn deep farm system.
Yeah, it is. You got to give Han credit for getting all that.
Yeah, I'm actually FanRags has an article of which team has the better farm system, the White Sox or the Braves. Curious of what they list their answer as.
Yeah, I know the farm system for the Braves is really good. I'm just not as familiar with the players, so I can't really give an opinion.
here's their overall take. It's tough to say one system is better than the other right now. It all depends on how you look at a farm system. The White Sox are top heavy with a lot more major league ready prospects. The Braves are deep with a lot more major league bound prospects in the not too distant future. The White Sox have the current edge simply because they have more ready prospects. But in 2019 and 2020, when the Braves rebuild comes to fruition, it may not even be close.
Interesting.
So that's pretty interesting.
But yeah, I mean, obviously I kind of take it as a grain of salt because you don't know what they're going to turn out like in the major leagues. So, it's just kind of something I look at and say, well, okay, but we'll see how it actually turns out.
Yeah, and I didn't even include in there Luis Robert, who another outfield prospect. So
I know Luis Robert. He's kind of further off, isn't he, from the majors?
I mean, they're gonna try to sell it to you, like that, but or that he's closer than he is, but he's a good couple of years away. Just think, basically, consider him like Jorge Soler.
Just thinking that
is very similar type of player and very similar as far as their trajectory of what you expect from them and where they're at when you sign them. So it's going to a couple years off, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what a lot of people I think the last projection I saw for him was 2019, so not this year, not next year, but the year after. But, things obviously change along the way, but that's the last projection I saw was 19 or 20.
Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe mid 2019, but more likely 2020.
Yeah.
That would be my prediction.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Maybe move on. Don't really have much basketball to talk about.
Oh, there is one thing. Yeah.
Derrick Rose signed a 1-year, $2.1 million contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers, which is funny because he's been talking for how many years about getting a max contract, and he got $2.1 million.
Well, things change when you get injured over and over, and your skills kind of diminish because of those unfortunate injuries. So, let's wind the clocks back 6 years, 7 years. This was the Messiah of the Chicago Bulls, the man to lead us back to the promised land for the first time since the greatest of all time, and we could only imagine him being a Bull the rest of his career. And now he's going to his third team, and he's going to the hated Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, but you left off one over in your injury list, over and over and over again.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So yeah, I don't see how this is going to help the Cavaliers. He's not really going to replace Kyrie Irving when they trade him.
At this point, no.
And speaking of the Cavaliers, I don't know if you saw Michael Rappaport, the actor, had made a video shout out to LeBron today and totally called him out. Whew.
I heard about it, but I didn't see it.
Oh man, he's like, start off with, he's like, Kyrie, good for you. Get out of there while you can. And he's like, LeBron, this is what you get for creating this whole mess. He's like, you don't have a point guard, you don't have a GM, and you don't have a chance to win next year.
Well, I mean, things are pretty crazy in Cleveland right now. They still don't have a new GM. You have this Kyrie Irving drama. They lost in the NBA Finals, which was kind of no surprise. And people are talking about LeBron James being gone when his time is up in Cleveland this time around. So yeah, there is a lot going on there. And this whole Kyrie Irving stuff, when it just popped up, people were dumbfounded by it. And well, they got Derrick Rose now, but I don't know what to make of it, really. I really not emotionally attached to him like I once was. I still have my Rose jersey. I'm not going to go out and burn it or anything, but, I don't know. I don't have much feeling towards it.
Yeah, I heard right after they signed Derrick Rose, the Cavaliers also signed a sponsorship deal with Band-Aid. Boom, boom.
Did you make that one up yourself?
No, I saw somebody tweet that.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you made that up yourself or you're just kind of like on Twitter saying, okay, Derrick Rose jokes. Here's a list of them.
No, I saw that one earlier, and I just remembered it when we were talking about him. I would love to be a fly on the wall in any of the Golden State Warriors houses right now after hearing that they re-sign all of their players and the Cavaliers signed Derrick Rose. 2017 Derrick Rose.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's very sad to see how far he's fallen and that those injuries have really built up on him. And he was a very favorite player of mine in his MVP days. Unfortunately, a great career and getting some bad advice also. And things not being handled exactly the greatest has kind of led to this. But it's just weird to think about how it has come to this. And with the way the Bulls are, I don't have much emotional feeling. And did you also hear that Kyrie Irving wanted to play on the Bulls with Jimmy Butler before he was traded? Did you hear that?
Yeah, and if that's true and the Bulls didn't figure out how to get him, then shame on them.
Well, I don't know if they would have been able to, but
I like Kyrie Irving. I think he's a very, very good player.
He's insanely talented.
And one last basketball note, though, is on my flight home yesterday, do you know who was on my flight?
Who?
Steve Kerr's son, Nick Kerr.
Really? Really?
Yeah, I would not have known anything else except he was standing in front of me waiting to board, and I saw he had the Golden State Warriors luggage tag on his bag, and it said Nick Kerr. And I was like, that's funny. He's got his last name is Kerr, and he's got the Golden State Warriors thing. And I'm like, wait a minute. I wonder if he's like related. And I Google and like Nick Kerr, son of Steve Kerr. And I was like, and I'm looking at pictures, and it looks like him, except all the pictures I could see were like a couple years old, and he's still young, so he looked a little bit different. But then I looked at his actual luggage, and it was the official luggage of the Golden State Warriors with their logo emblazoned on it, with Steve Kerr, with S. Kerr monographed on it.
That's pretty cool.
So I was like, oh, man. And then I was like, I should say something. And then I was like, I can't think of anything that's not weird that I would say. Hey, I liked your dad.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be kind of awkward.
Yeah, and I was like, crap. I was like, I can't think of anything to say. So I'm like, I'll just shut up.
Good idea. I can't blame you.
All right. There's no real Blackhawks news. They had the Fan Fest, which I didn't go to.
Yeah, you bring back Sod and Sharp, and we all know that story. And right now it's just kind of that time you're waiting for camp to start, and yeah, not much else to say.
But we do have the Chicago Bears getting ready to open training camp, which the show didn't get the invite for the press this year. Reached out to them to try to get us both on the press list, and I was told that, quote, alternative media would not be invited this year.
Why am I not surprised?
I figured it was going that way because under Emery, invited. I was invited to the whole whatever day I wanted to go, and then the 2 years ago, they were like, okay, you can come on any one of these 3 days, and I was like, okay, and it was good. I mean, they were very restrictive rules, much more restrictive than the other regime. Then last year there's this one day you can come. And they told us like 2 days in advance. And
that's disappointing.
And then this year they're like, no. So it was weird. Is when 2 years ago when they did let us go, it was you can't take pictures unless except if they're doing non-team drills. So basically, I could take pictures of players drinking water or eating lunch or stretching. I think stretching was okay. I'm not positive, but possibly.
Oh, we don't really want to see how they stretch. It's kind of secretive.
It's an advantage that other teams want.
It's disappointing. Really would have been good for me, especially trying to upcome and do this kind of stuff to be part of that. But
I don't know if I would have been able to make the days, but I thought it would have been awesome for you, especially since you get to hobnob with all of the score and ESPN radio. And,
I would have gone, no doubt.
Yeah, and it would have been. I think that would have been fantastic. Nope. And they seem to have a different publicity guy every year. So like I email the guy I talked to the year before, and I'll get a bounce back like this person is no longer with the Chicago Bears. Reach out to this person.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's a real bummer. I think this is going to be an interesting camp, and with the quarterback situation and some of the moves that they made. But
I was just writing about it, and I said this is going to be one of the most interesting camp in years with Trubisky and some of the other rookies, and plus with John Fox on the hot seat, you can't help but wonder how he's going to go forward with the season, and especially seeing how him and his team work with Trubisky. So, yeah, I'd definitely say it's one of the more interesting ones we've had the past few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was getting a little worried. We talked in the last show about Trubisky hadn't signed yet, and he finally signed. And they agreed on the language that they wanted to use. So he's done deal. He'll be there, no holdouts, and that's good. But there's going to be some interesting position battles this year, and there's some guys that we've come to know that I think are going to be on the hot seat this year. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on some of these position battles, but
yeah, I have a few.
One I think is going to be really interesting is the running back.
I was just thinking of that one too.
We introduced a new name on the team last year in Jordan Howard, but he definitely took his opportunity and literally ran with it. But we added another, like a scat back type in Tariq Cohen, and we signed some veteran names, and we still have Jeremy Langford and Kadeem Carey on the roster, and you're not going to carry like 5 or 6 running backs, so you're going to see some names cut there.
Yeah, and I think what I was saying in an article I was just writing, and this is just kind of what I think, I feel that Howard and Cohen are going to be your 1-2 right there, and then Langford would be your number 3. Langford was a guy we were all so high on in his first year, and we thought, oh, here's the next step up to Matt Forte, and then Jordan Howard came along, and then it's like, oh, well, we'll have Jeremy Langford as his number 2, and then you get Cohen, the human joystick, and you're thinking, wow, this guy's got a lot of tools. So I think there's going to be a pressure between those running backs, especially as you said, to compete for that spot. But I think that the coaching and management would be high on Cohen, considering where they drafted him and the upside that he does have.
Yeah, honestly, Cohen, unless he just absolutely stinks and can't play at all, you have a feeling that he's going to make this roster. Jordan Howard, lock to make, unless there's injury, but if
right,
assuming health, he's a lock, and it's going to come down to, I think, Carey or Langford, and who you carry, and it's one performed great as a backup to Matt Forte, and you saw the flashes there, but then didn't bring it forward when he was the man. Kadeem Carey, he's a guy who, and I think John Fox really likes him just because he's physical, but he's also a guy that was drafted by the previous regime, and he's a guy who He's not going to hit home runs, and he's had a little bit of fumble issues. So I don't know. I just don't know. If I had to pick right now, I would say Kadeem Carey's gone and Jeremy Langford's kept.
It's kind of how I feel.
Because Benny Cunningham is there, and he's a guy that's still young. He's 27. He's got more experience than any of them, and he's a guy who Tariq Cohen you're not going to put on special teams unless he's returning kicks.
Right.
But Benny Cunningham will play special teams, so that's a specialty where he's better than any of the other running backs. And so I just feel like they keep 4 running backs and probably Carey's gone.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, because you look at the value that each one brings, and even though, like you said, John Fox likes Carey, I think that the other options probably bring more to the table in the end.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be a really interesting battle. That's one I would really like to see because, somebody. It's going to be more than just about who runs the ball well. It's who plays special teams and who's the best blocker, because they want to protect these quarterbacks.
Right. Yeah, that's especially big now.
Another position that's going to be interesting is tight end. I don't know if the Bears have a ton of top end talent at the position, but I think they have a lot of depth there. The guys they have currently on the roster are Ben Broniker, Daniel Brown, Zach Miller, Michael Pruitt, Adam Shaheen, and Deion Sims.
I think Shaheen is the guy that a lot of people are going to be looking at in camp, considering he was part of last year's draft, and people thought, whoa, Division II school, we're really taking him, but people think that Pace really does have his reasons, and so I think that'll be interesting, and I still feel like Miller is going to be the number one guy, considering that he's been productive while here when he's played, because, he's had some injury problems like last year, but yeah, I don't really have anything else much to think about that other than that, like you said, there's options. It's not like we have a Jimmy Graham or something on the team, but there are options.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the tight end position goes, I think Adam Shaheen, the thought is after he gets a little bit of experience and bulks up a little bit, that they're looking at him to be their Jason Witten or their Dallas Clark. A guy that has deceptive speed, big enough to block, and is just a complete mismatch. Deion Sims is the guy that they just paid good money to. And you like Zach Miller. I think he's just an absolute fan favorite. Well-spoken, good ambassador to the team, good teammate. But as much as you like him, he's 32 years old right now. He's had an injury list a mile long. And you saw some flashes from guys like Ben Broniker and Daniel Brown last year that, how many tight end sets are you going to run? It's hard to. I think Michael Pruitt probably doesn't have much of a chance, but I think Zach Miller is potentially a guy that could be a big name cut from this team. So no team goes unscathed through the preseason. It's just whether or not it's an important key factor guy that's injured, or if it's just a fourth string tight end, whatever the case may be. So I mean, all of this is just pre-camp guessing, but we definitely know there's going to be battles at these positions. Now I'm just giving sort of my prediction. I mean, if Zach Miller's healthy, and he's clearly a better talent than Ben Broniker or Daniel Brown, but it's if he's healthy. Wide receiver is going to be an interesting one too. I mean,
Kevin White's the big guy. A lot of people, I think, are going to be looking at.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on him. It's only his third season, but he's a guy that was the first overall pick taken by the new regime when they came in, 7th overall. There's a lot of pressure for him to succeed, and if all of his other picks, if all of his other draft classes turn out to be hits, Kevin White is still going to be a mar on the record of the general manager because he was the very first pick taken. Kevin White has all the tools in the world, but because they were leg injuries, he can't go out on the field. I mean, if he broke his arm instead of his leg, you can go out there and you can run the patterns. You can go out there and do those things. Just because you can't use your arm, you just don't do the catching. But when you break a leg, you're not out there running. You can't do any of those things. You miss reps. If you don't have reps, then you are essentially another rookie.
And this is a team where we're all saying we want to see Kevin White succeed because we remember the team that got him here, that awful 2014 team, and that's kind of, you look at him and say you want some redeeming quality from that year, so it's kind of another added pressure, I guess, just on the fans.
Yeah, but you have a good number of players on your roster. As far as wide receiver goes, you got Josh Bellamy, who, although he wasn't a very good wide receiver, he was a very good special teams player, and that's going in his favor. You've got Daniel Braverman, who was a phenom at Western Michigan, but he never really broke the active roster. He's mostly in the practice squad. Victor Cruz, who you just signed, who has had a very good career, but he's also not the same player he was. But he's a veteran. You have Titus Davis, who has the potential to be very good, but he's a young guy. You have rookie Tanner Gentry. Cameron Meredith probably is going to go into there as your number one. He's going to get the number one reps.
I would imagine so, especially with the way he played last year.
Yeah, so you have to assume he's going to get number one reps, and it's going to be his spot to lose. Ruben Randall is still only 26. He's going to have a opportunity. Deontay Thompson, I think, still has talent. Plus, he's a special teams guy. Marcus Wheaton is a guy you just signed as a free agent. Kevin White was your very first first pick. And then you've got Kendall Wright, who you just signed, who's going to be probably your first opportunity as your slot guy. So if everybody plays to where you think they could play in this wide receiver core, I think you're going to be not only deep, but you're going to be fairly good. Because if Kevin White is what you thought he was going to be, and Cameron Meredith plays like he did last year, and you added these other pieces, that's pretty darn good wide receiver core. But if Kevin White is hurt or just never recovers from the injuries, Cameron Meredith is a flash in the pan. Victor Cruz is old, and you're looking at like Marcus Wheaton as your number one receiver, and then suddenly it could be bad real fast.
Right, exactly. So the receiver position, I think for me, when I look at it, I really want Kevin White to work out. I really, really do. And I'm almost dreading in camp where you hear carried off by field by people, and you're like, oh, here we go again. And that's something I really just don't want to hear. I want him healthy. I want him playing the full length of camp and in the preseason and get to the regular season fully ready to go. That's really what I'm looking at. And, I'm curious to see how guys like the one guy we brought in, Kendall Wright, I just kind of curious on how he does with the system, but really the main guy I'm looking at is Kevin White.
Yeah, if Kevin White is everything we had hoped for, or even 80% of what we hoped for, then I think this is going to be a pretty solid wide receiver roster. We'll probably keep 6 guys. So this is actually an open battle. I mean, Kendall Wright's not signed to the kind of money where, you can't just cut him. Because if Daniel Braverman is what he was in college, then that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So, this is another interesting battle. I don't think offensive lineman's going to be much of a battle. I don't think quarterback's going to be a battle. They've already Sanchez, is going to get, even if he's the second string, he's going to get third string reps because Trubisky's going to get the second string reps because he's the future, but they don't want him to start. Mike Glennon's going to be their starter. So linebacker, it's just going to be
praying they stay healthy. Hint, this is kind of a theme here.
It's going to be Danny Trevathan. Is he going to be healthy? And if not, then who starts in his spot until he gets back? Is it going to be Nick Witkowski, or is it going to be like John Timu? But I don't think there's any sort of drama there. I think the last position where you're probably going to see a real competition is the defensive backs. I mean, the corners probably not as much, because I'm imagining Prince Amukamara and B.W. Webb and Kyle Fuller are probably going to get
There's one I think we got to look at too, is Kyle Fuller. Missed all last year. You want him to succeed.
Yeah, so I think those guys are going to get their shot at the starters, and it's going to be, do they stink or somebody step up and be good? But I think those are the positions that are. Those guys. Marcus Cooper will be up there as well. I just don't see a lot of drama. I think it's going to be the guys we expect to make it are going to make it. But safety is the one where it's wide open.
Yeah, I mean,
we went out and we signed a Quentin Demps to be the one starter, but opposite him, it could be honestly any number of like 5-6 guys. Adrian Amos probably has the most experience.
right.
You've got Deion Bush, who was a draft pick. You've got DeAndre Hall, who was moved, who they liked enough to not cut when he was arrested, and they moved him to a position. DeAndre Houston Carson, your new draft pick, Eddie Jackson, a starter from last year is Harold Jones Quartet. You've got a special teamer in Chris Przinski, who's a veteran. You've got a lot of names that could start opposite Quentin Demps.
Do they still have Crevon LeBlanc?
They do, but he's a cornerback. So,
I know. I just thought of that off the top of my head. I was wondering about him.
yeah, he's still on the roster. I think he'll probably make the team. They like him enough, but I can't imagine him. There would have to be a lot of injuries for him to be a starter.
Right. And I mean, it's kind of interesting with the Bears this year where they've definitely had more depth than they've had before, yet it seems like you have your pretty certain guys who are going to make it at their position, except like you said, safety, that's kind of in the air. I would put money on Amos making it, and Jones Corte, I would also maybe put my money on making it. But yeah, like you said, it's pretty wide open on that end, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because you look, Adrian Amos has 3 years of experience under his belt, and he's only 24 years old. And Eddie Jackson, who they just drafted from Alabama, it was also 24. So Adrian Amos was a young player.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I mean, I'm still not that sold on Eddie Jackson, other than his special teams ability. I'm not that sold on him being a star like a lot of other people are. I think it's going to be a tight race between DeAndre Hall and Adrian Amos.
Mm-hmm.
I really like DeAndre Hall, and I think the Bears do too, and they're just trying to figure out where the best spot for him is.
Right, and that's probably something they're going to work out during camp and during the preseason, so that's something to keep an eye on, obviously. it's funny. You look at some of these Bears players and where they kind of sit, and what I see is a lot of solid fill-in guys, but you don't really see any of those secondary guys. At least I don't see them butting into like some of the top in the game. I really don't. I just see them being as solid role at best fill-in guys who are not terrible, but they're not stars. I don't really see anyone butting into something huge.
No, I don't see any superstars in there, but I think honestly, I mean, just looking at it, is we're far superior than we were last year, based on health and adding players. I think we're the two things that Ryan Pace wanted to do was add top end talent and add more depth, and I think he's done a pretty good job of adding depth at most positions.
Yeah, for sure.
And like depth, not just guys that are there, but guys that actually can perform if needed to a respectable level.
Guys that aren't just respectable on a practice squad, more, actually in a game.
And he's going, as he can to add top end talent. He added a quarterback that we hope is a top end talent this year. He added 2 years ago what he hoped was a top end wide receiver. Last year was what he hopes is a top end pass rusher. So it's, you add top end talent when you can, and then in the meantime you just keep adding quality depth. So last year was defensive back was just an abysmal wreck. And this year, even with some injuries, I think you're gonna have a respectable team. Prince Amukamara, is he great? No, but he's still only 28 years old, and I think he's good enough. I like Marcus Cooper. I also like B.W. Webb, who played for the Saints. I think both of those are nice pickups. And you still have Kyle Fuller, whatever you can get out of him. You still have Bryce Callahan, who's another guy that is well liked around there. So you've got some guys that are okay, and then you've added a lot of defense or safeties. Quentin Demps is a clear upgrade to what was. I would say that one of the worst safety duos in the team history, but I can clearly remember a couple of years ago when there was a worse one.
Yeah, let's not talk about that.
Quentin Demps definitely brings up the cachet of the safeties, and then that means you just have a serious competition to not only start but to make this roster, is because you're probably going to carry 4 safeties, and so somebody's getting cut. As much as I don't like Chris Brzezinski, he's a veteran that knows where he's supposed to be, and he plays good special teams, so he's got a good chance of making this roster. Harold Jones-Quartey, DeAndre Houston Carson, DeAndre Hall, Deion Bush, Adrian Amos. A couple of those names will not be on this roster when the season starts.
Yeah, that's part of it.
It's a good problem to have. It's good to have. I like it when you go into camp and knowing that somebody could be cut. That means you've added actual competition. It's frustrating sometimes, like offensive linemen. I'm frustrated at that situation because while you center guard, you're probably right at the top of the league as talent. The offensive tackle positions, the talent is not good, and you don't have depth either. That the 2 starters from last year are going to be on the team this year, and they have minimal push from behind to supplant them.
Right, yeah, and like you said, seeing a little bit of the competition in certain areas is nice, knowing that there's been a bit more depth added, and that's obviously something that's going to be kept being added throughout the years. But I think that I got to give a lot of credit to Ryan Pace for putting some of this depth on this team, because one of the biggest problems for so long is that this team really didn't have any depth, and that is another factor that makes training camp more interesting. You know, obviously the quarterbacks are going to be the main focus, but with all this added depth, there's going to be more to look at than usual.
Yeah, I mean, look at Mitch Unrein, who's like a kind of a fan favorite, a blue-collar kind of working man's defensive lineman, and came out of nowhere and played okay enough for being on a bad team. But you know what? He shouldn't be a starter on a team with a quality defense, and he's got a very good shot at not even making this team this year.
Right, yeah.
Especially, I mean, depending on how like Jay Howard plays and how Jonathan Bullard comes along in his second year, there's a good shot that Mitch Unrein just isn't on this team. And, if you have a guy who started for you last year that's not good enough to make your squad the next year, that's clearly an improvement.
Right, exactly. And that's the ultimate goal. Keep improving during this rebuilding time.
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I guess we'll be watching it on via the news and blogs, because they don't want, quote, alternative media there.
That's disappointing, but oh well.
Yeah, maybe when John Fox retires / gets fired, that somebody else will be cool with it.
Yeah, right.
Well, I don't really have anything else to add. I don't know about you.
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. A lot obviously coming up with camp, and the Cubs got to get back to winning. They're 8-2 so far in the second half. Really good start. They just got to keep it up. So here's the hope for that. We'll see what moves they make, if they make any more moves.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for listening, and be sure to check out the next episode, because we'll be talking about any other trades that didn't happen, and hopefully talking about the Cubs still being on a hot streak. If you guys want to reach out on social media, at ShyFanPat1, at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Make sure you subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Share with your friends. And again, thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers.